Welcome everybody. We are live. My name is Justin Meyer, and with me as always is Alexis Abril. And this week for Bitovi's free weekly JavaScript training, we're going to talk about the second half of what we talked about last week, which are DOM events. Last week we talked about how just the basics of how you can attach a event listener. And this week we're going to talk a lot about how events propagate through the DOM. So like when the user actually interacts with an element, like clicks on something, there's how does the browser determine which elements to actually call their registered event handlers, on which elements to call the registered event handlers. It's kind of a weird way of phrasing. We're going to talk about that and some performance strategies so you can listen to event handlers more easily and with better performance. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, and as always, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the Bitovi JS training room at gitter.im. You can ask us anything. And you can always find old lecture or old these videos and the old slides and things like that at bitovi.blog.com. And the JS bin that I'm going to be programming in this week is right here. Zokoperinhi. Close enough. So I left off last week going through the different type of events. And if you'll remember, there were different mouse events, key events, and HTML events. Now, different events also have a different default action. So when I create a link and I click on it, excuse me. If, for example, if I click a link, the browser will take me to that page. That is the default action of clicking on a link. So let's see an example of what I mean by this. I'm going to create a link. I'll have it go to bitovi.com. So now I can click on this link and it will take me to bitovi.com. I'm going to save my URL. I don't know what's going to happen if this is going to be lost. Okay, it took me to bitovi.com. Oh, that's because it's an iframe. That's really nice. Can I go back? No. If I change something. No? Interesting. I guess it's not connected, so it can't control the iframe anymore. There we go. Okay. All right. So that's a default behavior of a link, is to actually change the page. But in your event handlers for this link, I can actually prevent the default behavior. So if I'm using just normal jQuery to do this, which is just like our version of jQuery. So if I were to get that link, I'm just going to get the link, I'm going to listen to when someone clicks on it. I'm going to get my event handler here, and I will do event.prevent default. If I do this, now when I click Bitovi, nothing happens. Now interestingly, I could also listen on the body. And anytime someone clicks on the body, I could also prevent the default behavior of the click. And this would do the same thing. So I don't have to listen on the link to actually prevent its default behavior. I have to listen to I could also listen to any of its parents and call prevent default there for when someone clicks. So this slide that we were just looking at at has some of the most common default behaviors for different events. So submit, when you, the default behavior for a submit event on a form is to actually submit the form, right? That kind of acts like a link. It'll take you to the next page, but it will do a post request and send any form data along with the new, like the URL it's trying to post to. Click, as we talked about, that follows a link. A mouse down actually selects text. So we can see that here. If I were to, I'm going to change this from a link to a paragraph so it's easier to select text. So here I can select text, but if I were to change that to mouse down, now I can no longer select text. I am actually trying to, it will not let me. Listening to the context menu and preventing that will prevent the context menu here from showing up. This definitely works. I haven't tried this one in a while. This one definitely works in Firefox. Works in Chrome too. And key down, preventing default and key down or key press will prevent the actual text from being written. So if I do an input here, I can type here, but if I were to listen to key down, listen to key down and prevent that, now I can't actually type. So there's more default behaviors, but if the browser is kind of doing something automatically for you, changing the page in some way, more likely than not, there's some default behavior you can prevent. There's some event you can listen to and prevent the browser from doing that by calling prevent default. So I already talked about how you prevent those default actions. You just have a handler and you make sure you call event.preventDefault. And like I said, you can do this on any element that will receive the event when that event happens. So you can listen on the body for pretty much any time the user does anything, you could prevent it. But it's best to, typically you want this stuff contextualized. So when we were also clicking around in that page that demonstrated all the different types of events that you could listen to, we also saw some event data. So we're just going to briefly go through the common or most useful values on the event object, most useful properties and what they mean. The most useful is event.type, I think, typically. This just tells you what type of event happened. There's the target. That tells you the element the event was invoked on. So we kind of talked about this last week as well. If I am listening to key down and I console log event.target.node name, even though I'm listening on the body, when I'm hitting these key events, you can see the target element is the actual input where the event was most directly happening on. And there's also a current target, which is which element's event handlers are being dispatched. And since we're listening on the body, its event handler is being dispatched. So you can see that's why it says body now. So there's a bunch of other ones like timestamp, whether the event bubbles, if you can cancel it. Cancel means, does it actually have a default behavior? Is that right, Alexis? I think that's what cancelable means.
I believe so, but I'm double checking.
Yeah, please double check that. So this means, like, is there actually a default behavior that you can prevent default? Cancelable will be true. An event phase, we're going to talk about what event phase is, but really, I should say that I've never really used any of these. They're just there.
Yeah,
So
you're correct. Cancellables for default actions.
yeah, it does have a cool. So these are kind of the ones that more or less give you an outline of the event, where it is in propagation, if it's cancelable, that kind of thing. Now, there's other ones that are associated with like how the user performed said event. Were they like if for a click or a key event, it'll let you know if someone was holding the Alt Control Meta key or Shift key while they were doing that interaction. The Alt Control, I think we all know what that is. What is the Meta key? Is that FN on a Mac keyboard?
Uh,
Let's find out. I have no
that's a good
idea.
question. That's a good question.
All right, so listening on key down, and it's false, but I'm hitting the A character. Now I'm gonna hold FN and hit A. Nope. Now I'm hold Control. Now I'm gonna hold Option. Nope. Now I'm gonna hold Command. Oh, Command did it. Wait, let me clear the console. I think it's the Command key on a Mac. So, whoop. So yeah, these just let you know if someone's holding a special modifier key while they're doing some interaction. Kind of interesting thing I'm kind of thinking, Alexis, is like in the past I would have used these much more often, but nobody makes UXs anymore or that are complex enough where you're using the keyboard very often for stuff
It's
like this, or the
yeah,
special key.
it's rare. I see it actually in finance. I know
Mm.
there's a lot of groups that come out to the meetup that work on different financial projects, and they do basically, uh, rich, almost Excel type web applications where accountants need to really quickly type through different cells, and they'll do a lot of key checks depending. But you're right, I don't see it in too many places.
Yeah. So the next one is event.button, and this is which button was pressed, which is used for, well, as these are for mouse events. These ones are also present for key events, but this is, we're kind of talking about the mouse event focused here. I guess this slide's a little bit confusing. Let's talk about, did I close it? Hold on, I can find my PowerPoint, won't let me move it. Okay, so the button of a click. Okay, so I'm hitting my left mouse button and I'm getting a 0. Now I'm gonna hit my right mouse button. It won't actually work. But this is different in different browsers, I think, right? There's like a way to. You can't see what I'm typing. Is that because it's too small, James?
I'm fixing that link. You can keep going. I got you.
Oh, the link. Okay. Alexis, do you have a? Oh, there it is. I can hit my if I hit my scroll bar on this, I'm getting a 1. So like my middle mouse button produces a 1. My left mouse button produces. I thought in some browsers your right mouse button will actually produce a click, but I think that's removed because it hits the context.
I believe it did at one point in time.
Let me see what happens if I remove if I prevent default on the context menu. I have a theory.
Oh, that'll actually trigger the click, that the default is overriding it.
Something like that. No, that's not. I thought maybe so as we mentioned last week, a click is a down and an up on the same element. I wasn't sure if the context menu was appearing so fast that it was preventing the mouse up from happening on Bitovi, if that makes sense. And then there was never actually a click.
Yeah, I gotcha.
It was a wild theory, but it doesn't appear to be true. Different browsers give different things with, let's see what happens if I hit, it won't let me do it, or my mouse isn't good enough. Okay. Actually, Internet Explorer is the best, or was the best for this, because it had a bitmap for what key was you were using. So the leftmost key was 1. The middle key was going to be 2. So if you hit both the left and middle key together, you would get a value of 3. And the rightmost key was 4, or rightmost mouse button was 4. So if you added all 3 at the same time, you would get 7. That way you could tell like how many, if the person was using 2 mouse clicks at the same time.
It was bitmasked, yeah. Which
is cool and very useful for games. So I don't know what anybody is going to do if they ever want like a really, how to make a really advanced shooter game in WebGL. I don't know what you're doing there if you want to allow people to like do double clicks twice at the same time. I don't know about you, Alexis, but do you play computer games?
Mm-hmm.
Still? I'm not saying that's, I play video games, but I haven't played one on the actual computer.
Mm-hmm.
Like a first-person shooter since Jedi Knight Outcast or something like that. Do you remember those games?
Oh, I'm probably dating myself here. That sounds newer than anything I've played.
No, it's really old.
This
is like I was maybe early high school, 8th grade kind of thing. That's the last time I remember. I just remember needing to do like a lightning. You needed to click 2 keys at the same time with your mouse.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I'm remembering that. Yeah, that's a great game. Probably one of my favorite games of all time. It was just so much fun to like force choke people, and then throw them off a cliff. I'm a well-adjusted adult now, though. So, okay. So the related target. This is a very useful one for those mouse over, mouse outs. Let me get back to I'm just gonna move this. Stop seeing that. So the related target for mouse overs, mouse out lets you know which element you're going to. So if I have Bitovi and I have another Bitovi2. Actually, I'm going to create this as something else. And I want to listen on mouse over, and I'm going to give it a related target. I'm going to do related target.node name. So we can actually see. So you see it's the HTML element, then I moused over into the paragraph. That's kind of weird. Now I'm on the body. Oh, that's where it came. So on mouse over, it's where you were coming from. So on mouse over, if I'm going to mouse over the paragraph, I'm coming from kind of like the HTML element. And then, because that's the first kind of element that it can reach, and then I'll go onto the body, and then I'm now coming from the paragraph, and now I'm on the body, and I'm going onto the div, and then from the div I'm going to the body, and then why doesn't the input element, why can't I, oh, there I got mouse from the input element to something else, yeah. So this lets you know kind of where you're going from and coming to. I really wish this was present on focus and blur. It's just worth showing. Maybe they've added it, but I don't think they have. So if I can listen on the focus when something is focused, I'm going to create 2 input elements here. Actually, I'll even give the secret. If you want something to be focusable, that's a normal element, you can give a tab index. So now something else is focusable. And I have to listen to what focus enter if I want to be able to bind on anything. What? What is it? Is it? I thought it was focus enter with jQuery. Oh, but maybe only that's on that supports that? No.
No, they're both going to use the same API.
I'm just going to give it the old-fashioned way. Focus and blur don't bubble, or there's something, yeah, they don't bubble right, so you have to do some special stuff to get it to work. So jQuery does do it, but I'll have to look up how jQuery gets it to work. Input, yeah, so there is no related target with focus and blur, which stinks. It would really be nice to like, oh, there is. Just it's null. Oh, they do have it now. Awesome. This was such a pain in the butt like 6 years ago when I had to solve this problem. I'm so glad this is there. So they do have related target. I'm going to do related target and add that related target dot node name. Oh, this is great actually. I haven't had to solve this for a problem, but so it's null, then it's input, then it's div. Okay, so now you know where you're coming from when you're getting focus on you. You know what last had focus, which is huge if you're ever creating those interfaces where like, I made this one interface where once someone clicked, there would have like 3 things of text. It would say like someone's name, first name, last name, age, or something like that. And it would show up as a paragraph, but then when someone clicked on one of those 3, they wanted to convert it to an input element. And then they'd convert all 3 to an input element. And as long as you were clicking between them, it would leave them all as an input element. But once you clicked to somewhere that wasn't kind of set part of that group, all 3 would need to revert back to their paragraph. That was a nightmare to figure out because I didn't know, like I had to use it on mouse down and mouse leave. I couldn't use focus because I always had to figure out like, okay, what did they last click on? If you're clicking within something that group, leave everything focused. If you're clicking away from that, make sure you set everything back to just the paragraph form. I don't know if that makes sense to you, Alexis, but
yeah,
related
it's
target.
really common if you're editing like a phone number and you have like different inputs for each section of the phone number or something like that.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Related target is like your best friend in the world. So happy. Hopefully that's well supported in all browsers now. Okay, so key events. This is a broken slide. Key press. Alexis, if you can create an issue for this slide, just so we make sure we go back and clean that up. Yep. It's number 17. So if you're listening to key events, those event objects have a key code and a this isn't a key press. And I'm going to console log the key code. And they have a key code and a char code. So if I hit the, wait a second, did I do that right?
Yeah, I think you did that right.
Okay. Oh, they're the same code because A's character code is what is it? What's the function where you like it's stirred at something, like you get the character from the character code?
Oh. Yeah, I'd have to look that up. I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm gonna look that up. There's some, what's the method? It's on string itself. Oh, from char code. That's what I want. console log that. Let me hide the HTML. I don't really need that section. So I'm going to do the listen to key press and char code. Now let's see what happens when I type in some stuff. Okay, so you can see here that well, let's talk about what the difference between the key code and the char code. That's actually easiest to see if I listen to something like key down. So on a key down event, I'm gonna hit A, and you can see that there is no char code on a key down. It's only key press that has char code. Which is, hold on, let me do KD so we can see the difference between all these things. Key press. So I'm gonna hit the key A here. Okay, so the key down code happened. It's 65 because that is the actual key code. Now here, again, I mentioned this earlier. Key events in browsers are totally horrible and confusing. The actual key code of the A on a US keyboard is in fact 65. So you actually get valid key codes in key down and in key up. So we'll do that again. Oh, let me do. So this is very confusing. I'll do my best to explain it. To the best of my understanding, is essentially key press is more of like a pseudo operating system kind of event that's supposed to say, here's the character that was written out when there's a character written out. So what I mean by that is, like, if I type in A, you can see I get a key press event. But if I hit the left arrow key, right, I didn't actually write a character out, so there's no key press event, at least not on a Mac. And there's no oh, this is confusing. So let me just do key. I'm not doing a very good char key char. There we go. So here's A, and now I've hit left. Okay. So on events that actually are going to write, or sorry, on keystrokes that actually produce a character, the key down and key up will, the key value or the key code will be that 65 for A, which is right. But in Macs on Chrome, at least in Chrome, I know it changes in all browsers because of doing this with Sin. To get Sin to work through this was really obnoxious. The key code and the char code are going to match for a key press event, but it's going to match the actual character code. So you could think of it is that the character code is only valid in key up. Or sorry, the character code is only valid in key press. And then the key code is only valid in key up and key down. So it's like these are the, I don't know, key code is what is like the, I don't know, like the keyboard kind of giving you information. Like that's kind of how I think of it. And then this is kind of a meta event based upon key down, key press, and weird stuff with the operating system. That's just the best way that I've been able to organize it in my mind. It's very weird. Use a library that helps you listen. If you want to start listening to, like, if you're making a game or something where like the user needs to like hit left and right and do special key combinations and things like that, use some library that makes this easier. Don't try to figure it out for all browsers. And it even gets weirder if you start doing internationalization, because there's different keyboards out there where the different key codes, like for F3, well, does that even hit the, is it because, let's see if F8 even produces a thing on a Mac. It does not. It just hits the operating system. Oh, I think I have to hit FN. Yeah, okay, now I get that. Those. Yeah, key events are a nightmare. So let's move on. And let's talk about how events propagate through the DOM. So when you click on a link, that event works its way from, you could think of it from the document and through the body all the way to your link, and then from your link all the way back up to the document. They're dispatching event handlers on every element in between. And there's different phases of this, or for this whole process of propagation, there's different phases: the capture, target, and bubble phase. And we're gonna talk about what that looks like. So let's say I have a link, and that's inside of a div, which is inside the body, which is inside the document, which is part of the window. And I'm gonna click on that link. What the browser is gonna do is it's going to first find every registered event handler in the capture phase. It's going to first look for ones on the window and dispatch them. So what I mean by that is, let's get back to our example. I think it was inside of a div, there was a link. And link. Okay, so we have our link, we have our div, we have the body, and I'm going to, let's see if I can make that, get rid of some of the cruft here. We have our link, we have our div, the body. Okay, so I'm gonna click this link, and I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do is listen to window, add event listener. I'll listen to when click happens, and in a callback function, I'm gonna HTML for it now. But I'm gonna listen to, I'm gonna put a true here, and we'll see what happens. And I'm going to console log window capture. I'm just going to make sure my stuff that is working at least. Let's see what happens if I do window capture, and then I'm going to do on my link. I got jQuery here. I'm going to bind to click. And I'm going to, well, actually, I'm going to find my link myself. I'm going to add event listener myself. We get the actual raw element. I'm going to do event, add event listener. This is the A bubble. I'm going to push false in here. And finally, I'm going to listen on the window, but I'm going to put in false here, and I'm going to call this bubble. Okay, so what I've done is on the window, I'm listening to click in the capture phase, and I'm listening to the link in the bubble phase, and I'm listening to the window again on the bubble phase. So if I click this link, we'll get window capture, a bubble, window bubble. So this event handler is fired first, not because I registered it first. I could actually move it down here and just totally reverse the order of things. Click again, and I still get the exact same result. This is, so if you remember back to last week, by putting in true here, you were listening on the capture phase of event propagation. And by putting in false here, you're listening on the bubble phase of event propagation. So what that means, I'm trying to repeat this, is what the browser does is whenever a link is clicked on, it will fire off at first any event handlers registered on the capture phase of the window first. So essentially, window add event listener, some handler, comma, true, those will get fired first. It's looking for those registered with a true at the end. It's looking for those, and we'll fire off those first. And then it will move to the document, fire off any document event handlers for that event, registered with true, then the body, then the div. And now it gets, once it gets to the actual target element, the behavior gets a little bit weird. It will just fire off event, I think for Chrome, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Alexis, I think it just fires off event handlers in the order that they're registered.
I believe that's the spec, but you're right. I don't know which browsers honor it. I know Chrome does, but at this point, it's first come, first served.
Yeah, so if we can talk about what that means in a second, but I can show what that means in a second, but what I'll say it means now is that once you're dispatching the target's event handlers, whether you registered on the capture phase or the bubble phase doesn't matter. It will just fire off all events registered on this element in the order that they were registered. And then it will fire off all divs that have registered event handlers, or so the divs registered event handlers that have false because they're listening on the bubble phase. It will then do the bodies and the documents and the windows, and then it actually does the default behavior at that point, as long as no one has called prevent default. So I'll come to the demo in a second. So this is what's called event propagation, this process of which the event kind of moves from the window down to the target, and then from the target up back to the window. And now right now you might be wondering, like, why is this useful? It's useful. Why is all of this useful? There's a few use cases for it. The primary one for the capture phase, I think, is a lot of times for logging. Let's say you wanted to record all of the user's actions for analytics, or if there was a bug, you wanted to be able to play back what they've clicked on or what they've done. If you listen on the capture phase, you get that on the window, you get that event handler before anybody else has a chance to kind of prevent you from getting your event handlers called. So logging is very useful for the capture phase. And the bubble phase, this kind of, why don't we just always dispatch just the event on the target? Why does it have to bubble up to the window? It's nice that you can, for instance, listen to anytime anybody clicks the page to do some behavior. That's very nice for event delegation, which we'll talk about, and also even for analytics as well. If you're Google and you want to know when anybody clicks any link in the page and record that, well, you can just listen to the on the bubble phase of the window. Well, I guess you could listen to capture too. I guess the bubble phase specifically is for hierarchy as well. So like I could do things in this div for all links, but just for this div, and that's very useful as well. But I could make it so that if an anchor had, like some child had something special it wanted to do, it could prevent me from doing my action by calling prevent or stop propagation. Well, maybe at the end of this, I'll come up with some better examples. But let's talk about, so this is event propagation. You can prevent that. You can stop, if you're on an element, if I'm on the target here, I can prevent the div from actually having its event handlers dispatched. Or if you're in the window and listening in the capture phase, I can prevent every other element from its handlers being dispatched. So there's a function called event.stopPropagation, and this stops things from moving to the next element, although the propagation from moving to the next element. And there's also a event.stopImmediatePropagation that prevents the event handler from being dispatched, from any other handlers from being dispatched. So there's a difference between this. This stops the next elements of event handlers from being dispatched, but this stops any other future event handlers from being dispatched. So we have a little demo here, but I'm probably going to do this just in the JS bin because it's
basically just what you just did. Yeah, this is.
Yeah. So, okay, here I've got my
You don't have to add the div in between because it's the same kind of concept. You could just add the A capture.
Well, I want to start with this first and just show the preventing the default. So if you remember, I'm listening on the capture here on the window, the link bubble, and the window bubble. So that when I click this link, I get window capture, A bubble, window bubble. Now, if I were to call here in this capture phase event handler on the window, event.stopPropagation, what do you think happens, Alexis?
I am dripping with anticipation.
This one you could answer like you actually know. That's okay. You know what happens.
Yeah, sorry. I actually didn't see the code change. I was trying to get the links ready.
Oh, okay. Well, I will answer then for Alexis. What will happen is we'll just see window capture because this event handler is dispatched, but we're preventing every other element's event handlers from getting the event. Now, let's see what happens if I listen on the capture phase of my anchor. So let's talk a little bit about the target phase. Now, if you remember, the target phase is a little weird. Once it gets to the target, the event handlers are just dispatched in order. So that's why a bubble appears before a capture. I really hate this, but this is just how the spec works. I'm not sure why. I always figure if you do a capture, it should always get called before, but weirdly, that is not what happens. Order then suddenly matters, which is kind of weird that like these events, if I clicked on something inside the link, then I would get the capture called before the bubble, but just because I'm clicking on the link itself, then suddenly the order in which these events handlers can be called reverses. I hate that. Okay, but so let's click that link again. Now you can see here, a bubble is being called first. Now if I were to do event.stopPropagation here, now you'll notice that
you got a typo.
All right.
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. Okay. So now you'll notice that even though this is what we're talking about, that stop propagation only prevents other elements from having their event handlers dispatched. I'm calling stop propagation, but a capture is still called. But window bubble is not called because that's kind of a future element of something else's event handlers. You want to prevent that from being called. Now, if I were to call stop immediate propagation, now a capture does not get called. So like I mentioned before, the ability of this propagation that events do allows you to use a technique called event delegation that makes it easier and faster to set up a bunch of event listeners on elements. So let's say I wanted to know when anybody clicks a link in the page, instead of going to every single link, registering an event handler, and also making sure I'm constantly monitoring the page anytime anybody adds a link or removes a link, instead of having to do all of that, I can simply listen on the body and check if the target or something between the anchor and the body, or sorry, between the target and the body is an anchor. Then I know someone's clicked on a link. And this is the premise behind event delegation. So you listen on the body and you just see, once the event propagates to the body, you check, is the target an anchor? That means then they clicked on an anchor. Now it's a little bit more subtle, because if the anchor, let's say, had a span inside it and someone clicked on that, the target would not be the anchor. So that's why you have to kind of check, like, if any of the parents of the target is an anchor, well, then you can do your stuff, right? But this is a kind of a shorthand for this concept in general. Listen to something high up in the document and then check the target and see if it's what you're looking for. So we're not gonna do that demo. So we kind of the big thing is you don't have to there's two advantages. The most important one is actually you don't have to somehow detect if a new anchor has been added by the user. They appended a new anchor to the page and then have to go in and set your event handlers up. You don't have to worry about that. And the other advantage is you don't have to initially crawl through the page and listen, set up, maybe if there's hundreds of anchors in your page, you don't have to set up event binding on all of them. Instead, you just set up one event binding. So your startup time of your application can be much faster. So jQuery has this on method that allows you to set up event delegation. Here's the element that you want to listen to. Say, like, your root element. Okay, I want to listen to the body, on the body, for any time anybody clicks a div, right? That's how this reads. And this will internally listen on the body for clicks and then check if the target or a parent of the target was a div. And then we'll call this back. So, kind of talk about what this looks like. So someone clicked on an anchor, it's going to get to the, it's going to eventually work its way to the body. The body's event handler is going to be dispatched. Then what it's going to do is look at the anchor and see if that matches the selector. It doesn't match a div, so it's going to then check the parent and see if that matches the selector. If it does, it's going to invoke the event handler. Right out here I am. And then it'll get to the body and check if the body matches. Once it gets to the body, it kind of exits. So I'm going to implement, well, I guess we've already implemented it here, so I'm not going to write it out. Well, I will basically rewrite this code in our in my version of jQuery. jQuery has a has method that lets you tell if an element, returns the items in the collection that match a CSS selector. And the DOM provides a matches method, a pure DOM method called matches that lets you know if an element matches a CSS selector. So has is going to be used by on. to detect if like an element matches a certain CSS selector, and I'm going to implement on. So I'm probably going to do both of these right now, actually. So let's implement on so that it can take a event type, a like click, what CSS selector we want to match, and an event handler. If you want to try this yourself, huge props to you. You should pause now. And if not, you can enjoy watching me code. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually implement the on, and then we'll see kind of how I'm using has, and then we'll use that. So I'm going to use a little cheat sheet if possible. And unfortunately, oh, there we go. Okay, here we go. So on is going to take the event type, selector, and a handler we want to listen to. And the first thing is we need to listen on our current element. Like this, on is called like, to remind you, on is called like body on click of a div some function. So we need to listen on whatever this is in our current collection. So we already have our bind, so I'm going to do this dot bind, and I'm going to pass it the event type. So now we're listening on click on the body. I'm going to pass in my own event handler, and I'm going to. What I'm going to do is kind of loop from the event target up until it's equal to the event current target. And once it is, then I'm going to exit kind of what I'm doing here. So first I'm going to create a little container, or a little variable that contains what current element we're checking if it matches the selector. And that's going to be the target. And then I'm going to do a do while loop because I'm going to do my checking at the end. I'm essentially going to go until, as long as we have a current and the current is not equal to event.currentTarget. We're going to essentially keep looping on current until current as long as current is not equal to the current target, and we keep having currents. So all I need to do is check if inside here if current matches the selector. And I'm going to create a version of our element that's wrapped with our jQuery helper. And I'm just going to see if element has selector. So if something in this, essentially current is our jQuery collection, if that collection has something that matches the selector, then we want to call our handler. But just so you know, jQuery's has method, what it does is it actually returns another collection with the items that match this selector. So really what I want to do is just check that this has length. If this current matches the selector, it will return a new jQuery collection with just that original element in it. If it doesn't match the selector, it'll be empty. So that's why I'm doing this check. And finally, I'm going to call handler. If it does match it, I'm going to call it with this needs to be our current element and the event object that was passed. So this is kind of how you can set up rough event delegation on your own. Now we just need to implement has to work. And to do this takes a selector. And all I'm going to do is create some storage for the elements that are going to match that selector. And I'm going to loop through every item in the collection. And I'm just going to check if the element matches, which is using the native DOM method selector, then I'm going to do elements.push element. And finally, I need to return a jQuery collection. I'm going to do elements. Hopefully this works. It does not. I don't know why. It's weird that, let's check real quick our test. Where are these? Okay, the handler. Binding on the handler. Click it. I don't know why that's not working. I will have to come back and fix this. I'll put it close to an addendum if I did something wrong. But the code looks fine to me. I don't know if Alexis, if you see any.
Nothing jumping out at me. I was just actually making sure.
Let's see here. I just want to make sure that this is actually called. Okay, so this is being called. That's actually a good sign that it might be something that I'm doing wrong, or very likely something I'm doing wrong. Energy selector, let's push. Never getting.
Does Chrome have matches right now? Let me double check. Because there's a lot of proprietary, like WebKit matches.
No, that's. Oh, I think it does.
Yeah, it does.
Well, I think okay, so it's looking at spans. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I created an infinite loop.
Oh.
I'm never moving to the next parent. Current is equal to current dot parent node. There, now it passes. Okay.
Close,
so,
good save.
Yeah, I'm surprised it didn't crash the browser actually. But yeah, so I just need to move to the next parent and check that, or next parent element and check that. That was my mistake. So, okay, cool. I think that's almost it. Let's see here. What else do we have left to do? That was actually it, I think. So, yeah, we looked at the has, we created our on, where I forgot to do this parent node bit, even though I had it right in front of me, which is kind of embarrassing. So the big things to remember, the big gotchas, I think, with events are, you know, the order of dispatching events can be a little weird, and I think it's now standardized, so it is more or less the same in all modern browsers, but old browsers it wasn't the same. Remember, if you want to remove an event handler, you need to reference the original event handler function. Don't use mouse over, mouse out, mouse enter, mouse leave are much better. If you ever see anybody doing anything like this, they're not your friend. You need to teach them, show them this presentation and the one before it, so they learn like how to use add event listener. This is especially bad because you're kind of depending on globals. DOM1 isn't actually that bad. The problem with this is that you are there can only be one registered event handler, and you could potentially, if some other library was trying to add other clicks, they could overwrite each other. So these two ways of listening to events you just really shouldn't do. And that's it. Any comments, Alexis? Any?
No, I think the biggest takeaway with delegation is, I mean, or I guess biggest takeaway of all this is really just how to manage events in a scalable kind of way. You want to understand how these things work, because I can't tell you how many applications I wrote before Bitovi where I was just throwing, bindings just on everything in the world. Everything had its own binding. It's like Oprah, you get a binding, you get a binding, all over the place. And today's applications, you probably have a giant list of something, and it's probably paginated in one way or the other. So you want to know how delegation works to kind of make the most efficient setup you can if you're doing anything.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting though that in some ways we've gotten away from that now though, with like CanJS and other libraries that do we've gotten back to the DOM0 in some ways, where we write can click, right? It's different from a maintainability reason. So what I'm talking about is if you're using almost any modern library, Angular, CanJS, whatnot, you'll see code that looks like this. When on some div, if someone wants to click it, call, do something. That looks frighteningly similar to the old div on click equals, or is it just click? I don't remember DOM0.
No, it was on click.
It's on click.
Yeah.
Do something. You'll see that kind of stuff. Now there's a huge difference between these two things in terms of maintainability. DOM0, this do something had to be in the window. Like you had to have essentially a window.doSomething function that anything could call or anything could have access to. Modern libraries, do something is going to be very isolated to some kind of view model or scope that not everything has access to. So this is much better from a maintainability perspective. But from a performance perspective, neither of these are using them. I mean, this is not using event delegation. So at least in modern apps, I think if you have a huge ass list, like the biggest list, hundreds of rows long, instead of in each item in the list, if you're trying to listen to when someone clicks it, don't be doing something like this in any framework, right? If you can possibly avoid it. Instead, use your event delegation. What CanJS allows you to do is there's this events object, and it allows you to listen to tr click. Now, the hard part with this, though, is you typically always need some data associated with the click. And in old versions of CanJS, we would pretend that we were fast. You would do some kind of trick to use jQuery data and do data, this is a to-do or something, and that would add the data, and then you would do something like tr.data to-do, and get back to that actual to-do that was associated with this row of your table. Well, this still had this might as well have been doing an event binding anyways. It's pretty much just the same speed to add something to an element versus add an event handler. So if you don't think that this is a solution to get performance either, this kind of thing, because you're basically you're still doing something to every single element. The real way, if you really fundamentally need performance, what you need to do is probably to be able to draw out the row very quickly is you probably get your source element, your table element, and then you can do a index. You can get the index of the TR. So this is the 20th TR in my page. And what I'm going to do then is use that to get my list of to-dos. I'm going to use that, the index of the TR, to look up which to-do in my list it is. So this is some kind of advanced talk right now, but that's if you really need to create a really high performance grid or something like that. You really don't want to, I mean, you're best probably not dealing with any of the framework overhead. But for everything else, I think this stuff is totally fine. So
I agree.
yeah. Cool. Well, hopefully that's everything you need to know about basics of how events work. And I think next week we create our tabs widget finally.
We do.
Awesome. All right. I hope to see you, anybody who's watching this next week. We will be doing it at noon on Wednesdays Central Time. And please subscribe to our videos so you see them. We're going to slowly transition from this basic DOM stuff to a lot more of architectural best practices, more advanced topics. So until then, I'm Justin. With me is Alexis, and have a good week.